and uncertainty. Has the hunker down got you down? Today it is about 40 degrees here in Anchorage, Alaska. It's a little overcast. We've got some April showers going on, and I hope it's sunny wherever you are calling from around the world. So as we start today, please do take some time, all of you who have joined us early, to familiarize yourself with your screen. We have a chat function going on here, so if you can just kind of move your mouse around, see where things are, introduce yourself, tell us what your name is, where you're writing or calling in from, so we can see who we have and say hello to our speakers. Our speakers are still joining, and I see another one just joined us. This is so exciting. We are super excited to have this program. This program wasn't possible before. All of our featured guests are people who have flown or been here in Alaska, either as a speaker or a board member in the past. And the logistics of featuring so many people at one time together is just awesome. So we are super excited. This is our second virtual coffee chat and program, so bear with us. If we have any technical issues, we will try to fix them as soon as we can. We have Siobhan working as our production technician today. So if you're having any technical issues throughout the program, just open the chat box and select Alaska World Affairs Council in the drop menu and send Siobhan a message directly, and she will help you out. With our speakers, if we have any connectivity issues with them, we'll move on to the next speaker and try to come back to them at a later time and hope the connectivity works. We also want to ask everyone to do something fun while we're getting started here. If you can grab a piece of paper, write down where you are located right now. We're going to have a virtual photo shoot with everybody after our first speaker. So write down where you're at, and we're going to take this group photo, like I said, after our first speaker. So today's program is with some of my favorite people, and this has been so popular that we're actually going to repeat it with other speakers, former Alaska World Affairs Council folks, on the 7th of May. So if you enjoy the program today, afterwards, go online, sign up for our next program. We're working on that, as well as another one, date to be determined, hopefully the first week of May, with some Alaska FedEx pilots who are flying around the world, delivering supplies to Alaska and what they're experiencing. It's a crazy story and something we're super excited to share during this time of COVID-19. Like we said, if you're new, please say hello in the chat function. We're going to be keeping the conversation going during this program, both on screen with people talking and the chat feature. We'll also have some fun polls popping up, so play along. Please do answer the polls that will be popping up on your screen. And at the end, I'll show you the results. It's going to be a whole lot of fun. So with that, I think I will go ahead and get started. I'm going to see if we can find our first speaker here today. If you put your computer on speaker view, that will help pop up just the person who is speaking. And I will go ahead and unmute those people who are speaking to help with the connectivity. And I see here my favorite ambassador, Ambassador Kåre Ås. I'm going to unmute you. And tack för sist, Kåre. You are a frequent flyer, as we say. Look at that. You are a frequent flyer of Alaska speakers. You've spoken here many times. You were supposed to be here last month. Of course, that didn't work out. And I see you're hunkering down there in your residency there in Washington, D.C. I'm hoping you can talk a little bit about what's going on for my son who's in Norway and for everyone else in Norway. And then move on to what brings you joy and what are you looking forward to. This is a time for us to see what's going on around the world and just kind of have a little hope.
Very good. Thank you, Lisa. It's really great to be here on this coffee chat and with colleagues and friends and new friends from all over the world. And I must say that what the Alaska World Affairs Council, what you are doing in organizing these virtual events, that's great. I already want to sign up for the May event if possible, Lisa. So I'm, as Lisa said, I'm the Norwegian ambassador to the United States. I have been in this country now close to 7 years, and it's a great experience to be here, and it's an honor to be here, really. And United States is Norway's strongest and closest ally, and continuing to build that relationship between our two countries is one of the sort of the key missions of the embassy here in Washington, D.C. Then I have, before I answer the questions posed by Lisa to me, I also have to tell you that my favorite state, that's the great state of Alaska. And and I've been there many times, and I'm so sad that I'm not able to be there this spring, and that I was unable also to go to Alaska some weeks ago due to the COVID-19. So let me give some comments on the virus and the pandemic in Norway, and then come back to what I sort of the future and what I'm looking forward to. First of all, I would say that Norway is like the United States, hit by the COVID-19, but I think that we have been able now to control the contamination. People are leaving hospitals. There are less people on ventilators, and so the government is not trying to reopen part of the society. And that happened this week with primary schools from the 1st to the 4th grade entering back to schools, and also opening up of the kindergartens. And I think that you will see then a gradual returning back to not what the situation we had prior to the pandemic, but I would call it sort of a new normal. Economically, Norway is like the rest of the world, hit hard by the pandemic, and the unemployment rates they have gone up now to, I think it's 7 to 8% of the labor force is unemployed. But I would think that what is important from a Norwegian perspective is really that we have a social welfare system, and we have a system where the trade unions, the government, and the private enterprises are working together. And that is a sort of what we call a tripartite cooperation, which has been sort of in place for many decades in Norway. But the reason why I'm mentioning it to you now is really that sort of the tripartite cooperation that made it able for those unemployed to receive their salaries while they are not working. There are sort of governmental support for keeping the sort of businesses running, even though they are not sort of in function. And I think that so we don't have, I would say, in Norway, we don't have that fear that people are losing jobs. Some are losing jobs temporarily, but I think that when we are back to this new normal, I think they will be back to work also. Then I'm not sure whether all of you know, but Norway is an exporter of gas and oil. We are hit hard also economically by the low prices on oil these days, and which is also a global challenge, I would say, at least for the oil and gas exporting and producing countries. Living here in DC, the embassy's main task, as I said, is to continue to build the relationship between our two countries, but also my government, in order to handle the situation in Norway, but also to take an active part globally, because I think that the pandemic will hit, and it hadn't hit yet, I think, the countries in the Middle East, Northern Africa, and Africa harder than anywhere else, and it's important to take the global community to work together. So what we are doing at the embassy, we are reporting back what is happening in the United States, the measures taken both in Alaska, but the other states, but also on the federal level, and we are trying to sort of also give some advice to the government about the international economic situation, how the economic situation of the pandemic has hit the United States. And then we have also a lot of, I would say, consular affairs around the country. We have many Norwegians on these cruise ships. They have most of them have now been flown back to Norway. But that was really a massive, I would say, a massive amount of work. At the embassy, people are working from home. I go to my office every second day, rotating with my deputy, and we have a couple of diplomats there every single day. So to your question, Lisa, what I'm looking forward to, I'm looking forward to seeing you in person and seeing all other friends in person, but I think it will take a time for that to happen. And I also think that we, really, I think that this pandemic, I don't think we will get back to the normal social interactions as we had just some weeks ago. I think it will be a tougher new day, sort of living, how we live and how we interact, and that it's still, I think, very early in this pandemic to actually foresee how how we are going to interact in the future. But I hope, and I really look forward to being able to get out of this sort of being always inside, and to be among friends and others, and to interact with Americans, Norwegian Americans, and my friends. So I think I will stop by that, end by that, Lisa, and hand it over to the other speakers. And then I'm once again glad to be here, and really looking forward to the interaction between all of us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ambassador Os. We also have a chat feature at the bottom. You'll see it probably in the middle of your screen. People are asking questions and going there. So if you could kind of monitor that, and everyone, we encourage you to ask questions of the ambassador, any of our speakers, and each other in that chat function. And we were going to take a picture, but so many people have just joined, so I'll postpone it until after our next speaker. If you're new, please take a second to write down on a piece of paper where you're located. We're going to take a group photo with everyone after our next speaker. So write down a piece of paper where you're at, and we'll do that group photo here shortly. Next up, we had Ambassador Carlos Garcia de Alba, the Mexican ambassador to Italy, but I don't see him here yet. So we're going to skip over to my good friend Ishmael Kaldi. I saw him there. Hi, Ish. I'm going to unmute you there. Let's see. Are we doing it at the same time? There we go. Hi, Ish.
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, hi.
Hi. So Ish has been in Alaska twice and spoken for the Alaska World Affairs Council. And the last time I saw you, I stayed with you in your village in Israel. And it is so great to see you again. And we can't wait to hear from you and hear what life is like for you and others around you in Israel right now. And what brings you joy, and what are you looking forward to in the future, Ish?
Well, first, the ambassador said they also miss you and miss Alaska and the people in Alaska. But it is sad that we can't, be there this time. Nobody can travel. Look, the whole pandemic, virus, the whole thing put us all in the same boat, from Norway to Alaska to all over the globe. When it started almost 2 months ago, nobody knew where we are heading, what is going on, what's happening. It looked like a vague thing, vague, a threat. And here in Israel, like other places, the government, and by the way, we are in between governments. We have like a temporary government, and now we are forming, after elections, we are forming a new one. But quickly, the temporary government decided to focus on three things. First of all, on how to stop or how to block, the spread of this virus from, going everywhere. And to do that, of course, they closed schools. They asked people to, wear masks. You heard that before. Also, it happened here. Employment places were closed. People were sent home. We have 26, almost 27 unemployment rate, which is bad. We also have a good system here, with social system. So the government is helping those people who were sent temporarily home. So they will, of course, be back to their jobs, to their, positions, and will continue from there. The other thing was, of course, the other focus was how to treat, people who are already infected, like the positive cases. Do we have the infrastructure to do that? Are we ready? Do we have enough, ventilators? Do we have, all of these things, I think, and what we did quickly is, we had to export from even, countries we didn't have diplomatic relations with. because, you know, that's a good thing about, you know, unfortunately about that virus, that we quickly, you know, like, it's a human thing, you know, other countries offered us, okay, you need equipment, come and do it, and this is what happened. We brought, you know, equipment also from China, from other places. Hospitals here quickly were, you know, prepared, and we have, you know, state-of-the-art hospitals. They were, each of them was prepared, you know, to absorb new patients. We even turned hospitals, some hotels into, you know, to quarantine people, okay, who are infected, or who there is suspicion for them to be, you know, infected. And the third thing, probably, look, the third thing I think this is good about Israel is that it's an innovative, you know, nation. You know, quickly, like, you know, in laboratories here, research laboratories, medicine, you know, they started like 24 hours, of course, working how to develop, after identifying what kind of virus is, how to, you know, develop a new medicine for it to treat people with that. I think that is something about Israel. They're still working on it, and I hope they will, you know, they will find it. But I hope that soon we will be, after everything will be fine, and people will go back to normal. Now, another thing for us maybe about Israel is that, you know, there is the responsibility towards each other, you know, people here, no matter what their backgrounds, who they are. I think there is something called a small country, and the connectivity between people. And there are lots of Israelis all over the world, people who are traveling, you know, in India or in South America or even in Australia. And the government decided to collect all of them, bring them back home, you know, no matter how much it will take and what it will cost us. So we sent like airlifts from Peru, direct flights, even from Australia for the first time in Israel's history. Direct flights from here, almost 18 hours flight to bring people from Israelis from Australia, bring them home, from India, and of course from other places. So look, I think that, you know, we just before we started, the Deputy Director General of the Ministry of Health here was saying that, you know, this wave of pandemic, you know, virus got to its, you know, peak or something like that. So we hope he's right, but unfortunately at the same time, you know, we see every day new, you know, cases of death. I think today we had to, like a few hours earlier, we had about the 188 people who died, and those were mostly, you know, people in assisted living, people with background, you know, illnesses, and we have about 14,300 people who are infected. Many of them, you know, recovered. We have about 500 or 600 people who already recovered from the virus. And I think again, you know, I want to be very careful, but I think that we are, again, sadly say that we are in a good shape. I mean, people are obediences here, people wearing masks, you go all over, which is strange, by the way. You know, people like here in Israel to be free, to be outside, the kids playing around, but this is not the case. People are most at homes. You know, I'm here in the village, by the way. I am a little lucky because we are a rural area, and we are, you know, farmers, of course. So I was going up on, you know, like the hills, because this month, from the beginning of the month, I am off. I'm at home for a different reason. Have nothing to do with the virus. But, you know, people who are in the cities, it's very hard for them. It's very tough for them. They can go only to, you know, supermarkets to buy groceries. They can go only to you know, essential, you know, needs like medical care, and that's it. Of course, you know, you see the police on the streets outside, but most businesses are closed. You know, public parks, public spaces are closed. Nobody can go there. No beaches. People can go to the beach. It's illegal. And the economy, of course, was hit very hard. You know, the national airline used to be national. It's a private company today. Is El Al, that's Israeli airline, is not like, you know, grounded by itself. No tourism coming here, and we just had, you know, Passover, which is the Jewish holiday, And even the government have to declare a tough curfew. People can go for 24 hours because people who used to go on this holiday, one of the two good holiday, like great holidays in the year, families would sit down together, families would be together. Next week we will have the Independence Day also. No fireworks, no gathering, nothing. Everybody have to.
I'm going to have to cut you off. I'm so sorry. We have to stay on schedule, but we have a chat function on below, and I want to hear what brings you joy and what you're looking forward to. So please go on the chat function and chat that in and keep the conversation going. It is so, so, so great to see you and to hear about Israel. So please do keep the conversation going in the chat function. I'm going to mute you and go to Karen. I think you have turned off your screen. Dr. Von Hippel, are you there? There she is. Karen, there we go. I think we're both clicking at the same time. I got you. Okay. I got you. Karen is an East High grad. Go East High Thunderbirds, Anchorage, Alaska. But Dr. Von Hippel is in the UK, and we want to hear what it's like in England right now. What's going on in your world, and what's bringing you joy, and what are you looking forward to?
Well, thank you, Lisa, and it's a pleasure to be here. And Ambassador, great to see you again. It's been a while. But congratulations on pulling such a great crowd together. Yes, as you said, I grew up in Anchorage, so it's always a pleasure to participate in these events with all of you. So I'm in London, the director of a think tank that works on defense and security issues. And we, like everyone else, have been, like you at the World Affairs Council, have been going virtual with our webinars and our publications and really changing the way we work. And in many ways, this has accelerated some positive things for us, things that we should have done a long time ago. So I think going forward, we will certainly have more online events. It's really great, like this event, to get people from all over the world versus just people in London, really, which is normally what we get for our events. So in many ways, it's been a plus for us in terms of accelerating some changes we wanted to make. I would say our research agenda will definitely change after this is over. I think we're going to focus on a number of other issues. Public health hasn't been in our area, but obviously some people have focused on pandemics at RUSI in the past. But I would say also, in the UK, there have been some pros and cons. I mean, in some sense, this country has been very disorganized, and not just because the prime minister has, come down with COVID and was sick, but it's also because they just haven't been as organized as places like Germany or Austria. The testing has been slow. They've been over-promising and under-delivering, even though they keep publicly saying we want to under-promise and over-deliver, but they haven't done that. So it's hard to say when we're going to get to a situation where they can ease back if people still can't get tested. And that's really a problem. On the other hand, there's tons of amazing innovations happening here. I think we're luckier here than they are in France, Italy, or Spain, where you can't even leave the house to exercise. Here we can go to the park and the weather's warm and we're getting out, and I have a dog. So what brings me joy right now is my little puppy, who's snoozing, thankfully, right now, because otherwise she'd be barking and making a lot of noise. So it's interesting to me. I'm sure many of you feel the same way, how fast time flies, even though you're mostly trapped in the same space. I mean, I'm amazed it's already Wednesday this week, because time just seems to move quicker. We're starting to plan at work our return, even if it won't be for over a month, how we're going to do it, knowing, as Ambassador said, there'll be a new normal. And so we're not going to just go back to the way things were before. And so, and in the UK, real estate's expensive. So obviously everyone's an open plan. So we can't sit as close to each other. And, we have staggered work days, all sorts of things like that. We're starting to think through that. Personally, I like thinking about that because I want to go back to work and I need something positive to think about. But those are the main issues. What did you say? What brings me joy? And what am I looking forward to? I'm looking forward to going out to dinner with friends at a restaurant and having a glass of wine with some friends. So anyway, it's been a huge pleasure to be here. We're, hoping anybody who's interested in what we're doing, you go to our website and join some of our webinar events. We've opened them up right now. It's not just for members. And so anyone can join for the foreseeable future. And there's lots of great stuff. So more space in Anchorage. Thank you, Laura.
And Karen, can you put on our chat function where we can link to your webinars? They are so great. We would all love to know where we can go to those.
Okay, there you go, RUSI. So it's a Royal United Services Institute. And just for some people who don't know, it's the world's oldest defense and security think tank, and it was founded by the Duke of Wellington in 1831. And I'm the first female director, I'm the first foreigner, and I'm sure I'm the first Alaskan.
Well, as someone said in the chat feature, there's a lot of room here in Alaska. So if you want space, come back. We'd love to have you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, and now we're going to move on to one of our recent speakers, Grant Newsham, who we've been posting on our Facebook some articles, really provocative articles that you've been writing from your area of the wood. I'm going to give the microphone over to you. Everyone can look at his bio online. Grant, so great to see you again.
Okay, thanks very much. I enjoyed being in Anchorage last year and got to see snow. Yeah, I'm in Tokyo right now, and the rundown is, if you've been to Tokyo, you know it's a really crowded place with a lot of people. I was down in Ginza today, which is sort of the real down Times Square area, and there was nobody there. It was pretty much empty. This was the middle of the day, and it's been interesting to see, because this has really happened over about the last 2 weeks. It was all done in a very Japanesey kind of way, because the government has no authority to actually order people to do anything. So what they did is they declared a state of emergency and said, you know, it'd be really nice if we stopped like doing stuff. And just gradually you've seen shops and restaurants close down, museums closed down. The schools were actually shut pretty early on, but it's almost happened by stealth. And as I go out every day, I notice fewer and fewer things are open, and it is kind of strange just to see just how little there is in these crowded subway stations today. There's nobody there. On the trains, there's very few people, and everybody wears masks because it's the Japanese thing, and it's not I always feel like I'm a bank robber if I have a mask on. But it's all been, as I say, it's been done almost voluntarily, without complaining. It's not really the Japanese way to whinge and whine, but they've just gone about locking things up, and so you're not going to starve to death, but because, so say, restaurants are closed, shops are closed, Starbucks closed right away. There's a chain of these chocolate croissant stores that are really popular. And it's Yakuza owned. The organized crime owns it. And those were one of the first things to shut as well. I was surprised. They're good citizens, I suppose. So what you find is, if you do want to eat, which I like to, that the supermarkets are open. And there's no real rush. You can get anything you need, paper products, whatever, milk, etc. It's all there. But if you want to eat, you can your best option is like the equivalent of, it is a Denny's or a fast food place which sells ramen soup. So as a result, I've got this terrible diet now where I eat like soup, cereal, apples, and salad, and that's about it. I don't know how long it must be good for you in some. It sort of balances out the bad stuff and the good stuff, kind of. Finding a barber shop is a challenge. You had to take my bike about 3 or 4 miles to find a place. So it's been kind of unusual to see. And an old retired Japanese army general, we were talking to him about this, and about how it's all been done kind of quietly. And he says, yeah, that's nearly not our thing, is to sort of show a whole lot of emotion and go nuts. But it has been curious to see how this has happened. The government has taken a different approach than a lot of places. And it doesn't go around issuing orders, partly because it can't, but it just uses this kind of peer pressure, which is a sort of fear of being criticized, which is the great motivator here. They don't, and I think they tend to follow what everyone else is doing while trying to avoid the extremes, which is a good thing. You can go outside, though people are apparently reticent to, but so I'll go out and ride the bicycle every day, ride it over to Denny's 3 or 4 miles away. Obviously, the Olympics are not going to happen. And this was a huge issue, and it caused the government to sort of delay any measures it was going to take because they've got like $25 billion at stake if they were canceled. So they didn't. They tried to hold it off and as long as they could, but those won't be going along. In terms of sort of what I enjoy, it not it. I had to think about that because I do want to be upbeat given the nature of this. But I'd say I do enjoy going to Denny's. I'm not making this up. If you think that's like the high point of your day, because I can get all you can drink. I can get all that you can drink coffee and a piece of toast for like $3, and they let you hang out there. And there's people there because you do find yourself over the course of a day, you can actually not say a word unless you make an effort to. So that's the Groundhog Day aspect to all of this has been kind of sort of it's unusual. What I'm looking forward to, I would have to say, sort of, I'd say free people reclaiming their freedom. And that one can discuss that at some length, and I'm trying to be nice about it. But it's been an interesting experience. And I would note I was used to work for a bank, and I had a front row seat to the 2008 financial collapse. And I remember how people talked about algorithms and pedigreed math PhDs and the certainty that went with these guys with algorithms and degrees. And so and I know something about wargaming from my Marine experience, and the war games are almost always wrong. So when I heard at the beginning of all this, I say modeling, that raised some questions in my mind. But what I am looking forward to, as I say, is for people to be free again. And there's a psychological aspect to this in particular, that you don't want to have this go on too long, where people, are really intimidated by this belief in disease or what have you, and a belief that they can't sort of exercise what the mental freedom that manifests itself in a physical way. So it'll be good to see this get over that. And we'll see how it goes. But once again, I appreciate the chance to talk to you. And I'm glad I'm in Japan, because I don't think I could handle the U.S. version of the lockdown thing. But in Japan, it's sort of a Zen sort of way of getting through the restraints. So thanks very much.
Grant, thanks for that. And we posted the links to some of your articles, including the one that you wrote about algorithms and modeling. Fascinating. Love that article. So I encourage everyone to look at that and check that out. We appreciate what you have to say and pushing the envelope on your articles. At this time, we're going to take our photos. So if everyone would grab their photo of their paper where they are hunkering down right now. And Siobhan, our production technician, will take photos. You can smile over it if you're happy. Looks like our ambassador is happy to be in Washington, D.C. Okay, I see her taking photos. Thanks, Siobhan.
All right, I got them.
You got them. Wonderful. Okay, with that, we are going to go to our next speaker, the lovely Farah Kiladar. Let me see if I can find her. There she is. Farah used to live here in Alaska, born in Iraq, grew up in UAE, and educated as an attorney at Oxford. And now you're hunkering down in Texas, which must be fascinating. I would love to talk with you for an hour about that. But I'm hoping you can share a little bit about the Middle East and this area that you have enriched our community so much to get a better perspective on what's going on. What's going on right now there?
Hi, Lisa. Thank you. This is wonderful, what you're doing here. It's nice to see everybody. Yeah, I can spend the next hour talking about Texas, just Texas on its own, but I won't. I'll focus on the Middle East. Like you said, I'm from Iraq originally, and I did get to live in Alaska for 3 years, and it is my favorite state, I have to say. I wish I were hunkering down over there in the wilderness. But the Middle East is interesting. We already heard from Israel, how Israel is tackling this. And, But I would probably divide the Middle East between the Gulf countries, you know, the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, those countries, versus the rest of the Middle East, you know, the Iraq, Iran, Turkey, Israel. I mean, you know, because there's such a disparity between the two. My mother lives in the UAE, so I have sort of a firsthand perspective as to what has been going on. And it's been really interesting in that they have, in some respects, they've really been ahead of the curve. I mean, for quite a while, I was joking that if the Middle East is doing better than the US, we are in serious trouble. Because they shut down early on. There is no lack of PPE. There's you know, no overcrowding in hospitals, no lack of ventilators, none of those problems that, you know, we hear about in the US and the UK and other places. Abu Dhabi, for instance, they go into curfew at 8 p.m. until 6 a.m. and then the streets get sprayed every night. There are no people on the road, groceries get delivered, you know, things like that. You know, the reported cases in the UAE, and I checked today, 8,238. Part of me is a bit skeptical as to these numbers, because I do wonder whether South Asian communities are being reported. Indian laborers, those that live in very crowded communities. You get 10 workers to an apartment. On a normal day, in normal circumstances, unfortunately, the number of deaths of those laborers are not accurately reported. A lot of them are, their visas have expired, so their employers really don't report, you know. So I am skeptical about those numbers. But nevertheless, overall, they seem to be in a pretty good shape right now. The other parts of the Middle East, Iraq, Syria, Turkey, those places, right now, the largest number of cases is actually in Turkey. Those numbers have gone up significantly, and I think today Turkey was about 95,000, closely followed by Iran, which was really the first place that, you know, you heard about Corona in the Middle East. As we all know, you know, there are a lot of failed states in the Middle East right now. Syria, Yemen, as examples. Iraq, okay, not a failed state, but still in, you know, post-war conditions where the healthcare system is really non-existent. Not to mention refugees, which is really the biggest problem that the Middle East faces. I believe there was a New York Times article, I think yesterday, no, maybe a week ago. Time is an illusion these days. Basically saying that the Middle East is a time bomb, and primarily two or three reasons. You know, failed states is one. Refugees living in very close quarters, and, you know, no access to healthcare. I think we are talking, I think it was 12 million refugees living and internally displaced people living in Syria, Iraq, Lebanon, and Turkey, in 4 countries, 12 million refugees. So you can imagine how the conditions would be if and when Corona spreads in those parts. So that's definitely a glaring light as far as the Middle East is concerned. And I think one that we probably won't, unfortunately, be seeing a lot of reporting on, as sad as it is for me to say. And again, in those, you know, supposedly Iraq, which is my country of origin, has 1,600 cases. It's just inconceivable. Reuters recently reported that it was closer to 9,000, and upon reporting that, the Iraqi government withdrew Reuters' license to operate in Iraq. So that tells you about the level of transparency. So, you know, that would be sort of, you know, the overall look in the Middle East. I think the Middle East is still, we're not there yet in terms of reaching the apex. Where, you know, the numbers are still going up, even in the UAE, where they had shut down early on and so on. The numbers have not leveled yet at all. Nevertheless, I would say that I have been comforted by the fact that my mother is actually in the UAE rather than the US, rather than Texas, for instance, who has been delayed in everything. We're, I think, the second to last in terms of the number of tests that have been carried out. It's just Houston, a city of about 3 million people, almost 2.5. Actually, Harris County, which is more like 6 million people, we have 1,200 tests available every day. Only now, this is like the uplift now. This week, whoa, we have 1,200 every day. That is 0.025% of the population. There is private testing available, and in fact, the majority of testing here has been private. Last week, the number was at 170,000 tests in the whole of Texas, 161,000 of which were private. So that tells you how much the federal government has been involved. So it is quite surreal for me to feel more comforted that my mother is living in the UAE, where I feel that the response it would be far better and then it would have been here. What has brought me joy? Going out for walks, actually. The only outlet, only thing that stops me from going crazy. Slowing down of pace. I think, the first week I was hyperventilating because it was just very disconcerting. But as time passed, and I think as we've accepted that this is going to take a bit longer, that slowdown in pace has been really actually quite welcomed. What I look forward to is a haircut. But having coffee outside with friends and actually seeing people on the street, I mean that, and on a more serious note, really just being able to either visit my mother or having her come here. The inability to do that and the realization that if something were to happen to her, there's no way of me getting to her is not a place I very much enjoy being in. So like everyone else, I suppose I look forward to return of some level of normalcy in whatever form it's going to be.
Thanks. Thank you, Farah. So you have sparked a whole bunch of discussions. Please look at the chat feature. People want to know about MERS. What does that mean in the Middle East? I see some questions there for you, Ambassador Oss. So the discussions are going like crazy in the chat room. Thank you, everyone. With that, we're going to move on to Superstar, who got up. What time is it there, Sonia, in Russia? Let me see, I'm going to unmute you. Don't touch it. I will touch it. Well, or so I say. There we go. There you are. Nope, I got you. There we go. And Sonia, we had the pleasure of having on our board when you were here in Alaska with ExxonMobil, but you are back in Russia. And thank you for waking up at this god-awful time, I understand, with the time difference, and looking so prepared like it's no big deal. So what is it like right now for people in Russia? Enlighten us.
So I guess good morning. It's 4:44 a.m. I don't like to normally be awake this early. For me, so I am actually in the far east of Russia. So I'm over on Sakhalin Island. So I'm on an island, as it sounds. So I'm not connected to the mainland. I'm not in one of the major cities that you're reading about on the news. So just from a general perspective, Lisa mentioned I was in Alaska until recently. So I've actually just moved to Russia at the beginning of March and spent about a week in the office before we started working from home. And a couple weeks later, the country also went into the mandatory self-isolation. So I picked a great time to move, but that's a whole other story I could talk about for a very long time. So just kind of as a general background here, being in a smaller town, as I'm sure many can relate, it's a very different experience than being, for example, in Moscow right now. But borders to Russia did close on March 30th. So right now there's no foreign nationals coming in, no flights there's coming into the country. And it's been extended until May 1. So that's probably been the hardest thing for me personally. My husband and his family are around the world. Sorry, guys. Obviously, I've not been awake or made any sounds yet this morning. So I think that that's been the hardest thing for us, just being in self-isolation, you know, moving here, not knowing a lot of folks yet, and then kind of going straight into this staying at home, hunker down mode, and knowing that, you know, we both have parents that are of a certain age that is considered more of that high risk, and knowing that if something happened, we wouldn't be able to get to them right now. That's probably the hardest thing for us, because we're still able to work remotely. We're still, you know, there's 2 of us in the house. I have someone to talk to at least on a daily basis. So from the self-isolation perspective, that's not been too bad. From just the mandatory self-isolation, or it started off being called a week of non-working days. And it was, I believe, the week of March 30th. Days are all starting to blur together now, which has been extended through end of April. So for the most part, if you were able to work remotely, people are continuing to do so. But if you're in one of the non-essential businesses, you are kind of put on that mandatory, you know, you're not going to work mode. And in some of the bigger cities, you actually need permits to travel around, unless you're just going to the closest grocery store or one of those essential businesses like a pharmacy or maybe a pet store, or if you're, you know, taking the garbage out, or obviously, sorry, my tablet is, oh, there it is, new to Zoom. So yeah, so from the bigger city perspective, we have it a little bit differently here, because we live in a kind of outskirts of town. We're still able to get out and kind of do a little walk here, right, you know, on a trail right by our house. The grocery store we went to, I haven't been out actually to the community in about a week and a half now, so I'm not sure how it is today. But on the island, we've only had about 20 cases confirmed as of yesterday, versus, right, in the country now as a whole, there's about 60, getting close to 60,000 confirmed, and just over 500 deaths as far as I remember. I have not read the news this morning yet. So it is a little bit of a different experience for us here. I think what brings us joy right now is getting creative with cooking and baking, just kind of based on what we've been able to get at the grocery store. Doing a lot of baking. By the end of this quarantine, I may start looking like a loaf of bread, because we've baked so many of them. But it's definitely been fun to enjoy getting to do that with my husband. And I'd say what we're looking forward to the most is just finishing our move, because we still have certain things that none of our belongings have really made it here yet. So we're making do with what we have. And our dog we were not able to bring our dog over, and just certain things like that would have been great. Would have been great to have in time of sitting at home. I heard someone say having their pet has been one of the things that brings them joy. I enjoy watching other people's dogs walk by, but definitely makes me miss my own. But I'd say that the scary part right now, just kind of being on the island here, is similar to kind of some of the more rural parts in Alaska, right? If the system does get flooded, when you start reading the news about the medical system here, it definitely is a little bit concerning. And that's why my husband and I have been taking the self-isolation pretty seriously, that I do not want to end up in the, you know, Russian infectious disease ward of any hospital, but especially in a rural community. And just in general, the rules here are so strict that whether this was a pandemic or not, I personally would not want to end up in that part of the hospital. And I speak the language, so I know for a lot of foreigners here right now that can't leave, that's also been a big concern, is kind of how do you communicate once you go in and you can't get out. So I think I'm kind of getting close to my 5 minutes, but I'd say seeing how everyone's been getting connected and participating in programs like this has definitely been, it's been amazing to see kind of the world coming together from this environment. Has been awesome.
Thank you, Sonia. Oh my gosh, it's so great to see you again. And I'm so glad that you are healthy and not in the hospital. Even if you can navigate it and have those skills, we're glad that you're safe at home. Please do continue with our chat feature, because people are asking questions and we want to hear more from you. But we're going to go to someone who is even farther away, time zone wise, from Alaska, if you can believe that. And I'm going to unmute you. Don't touch it, John, because I got it. And let's see here. Well, having said that, it's not unmuting. Are you able to unmute it on your side? There you go.
All right. So, good morning from Shelley Beach in Queensland, Australia. So, and just number one, I have to say right off the bat, the first thing I did was put my Alaskan amber hat on, just to, make sure that everybody knows that I do have a great memory, and I'm looking forward to getting back to Alaska here soon. So, I mean, for me, it's been interesting and a little crazy in some ways. So I work in Papua New Guinea and my family lives in Australia. So I've kind of got a foot in both worlds. And so as this was unfolding, I was in Papua New Guinea. And because I'm a diabetic, I needed to make sure I had access to medication in a consistent way. And so for those who know about Papua New Guinea, it's similar to some parts of Africa and so forth, were very limited medical infrastructure. So I had to come home to my family in Australia. So, I mean, the Australian experience, obviously very different than Papua New Guinean one, in the sense of, a modern country, in terms of their response to things. I think it's comparatively, gone okay. I think it's variable, as lots of folks have already touched on, and depending on where you are, and urban density, so forth and so on. But here we're, I think, well, before I get to the specifics of my little hometown here at Shelley Beach, Australia is just about 6,600 and some cases. They've only had, as of today, I believe, 74 deaths. So obviously every death is regrettable, but again, compared to some, that's a very good response so far. Here where I'm at, it's similarly, relatively small town, not a significant population compared to some other urban centers. Folks for the most part, I mean, are behaving themselves in the sense of, just trying to get on with life. I will say that, being on a place called the Sunshine Coast, it's beautiful weather. We're not allowed to go out and, obviously hang around and do those kinds of things, but you can get out and exercise and so forth. And it's been interesting that this week my kids started virtual school. And some challenges with that, of course, because the schooling where they were wasn't necessarily designed or set up for online learning platforms that they're trying to do now, but they're getting used to it so far, and so that's good. I think they're more used to it than I am already, trying to be a stay-at-home teacher while also working remotely, supporting what's going on in Papua New Guinea. Otherwise, Australians and they've got a pretty kind of matter-of-fact approach to things, at least, here where I am locally. Definitely anxiety, like anywhere else. I find the less I watch social media, the less anxious I get, and the less anxious my kids get, and my family gets. So that's a real positive. On the work front, it was interesting. I had a bit of a drive around last night, and everything is shut. And there are still folks trying to be to keep their business going, converting things to takeaway and those types of things. But the micro economy of where I live is definitely being impacted quite hard. I mean, the Australian government has put in a series of programs to try to boost small businesses and so forth. And from a medical perspective, it obviously is a very different system than what we are used to in the United States. So in that sense, it's very we're very lucky to be where I am, to say the least. In terms of the things that I enjoy, again, getting back to that thematic of the Sunshine Coast, it's time. Again, because I work in Papua New Guinea, this has been forced time at home with my family, and I'd say I treasure every second of it. It's it's great to spend time with them, and because we are still allowed to get outside and exercise, I can go for a bike ride with my kid, and during his lunch break, his virtual lunch break, we can sneak off and go for a bike ride, or you can actually go for a run on the beach. So as long as you're exercising, you can do that. So, and obviously maintaining physical distancing. I really like the point that somebody brought out in the chat, the terminology piece of social distancing versus physical distancing. That's a great one. And certainly that's what I try to use with my kids. It's like, no, we're still social, guys. We're still social. The other thing I really enjoy is I do get to, so unlike Sonia, we were allowed to bring our dog with us. And so we brought our dog from Alaska, And so we get to take her for nice long walks, and we try to keep physical distancing as well, which is hard, of course, with a puppy who wants to play with every other puppy who's out on the path, and so you kind of have to fight a little bit that way. And, things that I look forward to going forward is really to, certainly within myself and within my family and my neighbors and then the broader sense of society is hopefully we're able at some point to start to shed some of this anxiety that this current crisis has brought on us. I mean, the sense of uncertainty and dread, not just about the disease itself, but everything that comes along with it. It's a real weight, I'll have to say, and I see that in myself at times. I certainly see it in my family, and if we're able to move away from that in any, others have talked about a return to some type of normalcy. I don't know exactly what that means, but the ability to shed some of that anxiety would be great. So again, just want to say thank you, Lise, for thinking of me and having me and have a chance to put on my Alaskan amber cap for you. Sonia, good to see you. And happy to answer anything in the chat.
Wonderful. And we will do some live questions at the end as well. So if anybody can stay, we're probably going to go a little bit longer. If you have to go, just say goodbye in the chat. And we're so glad that you could join us when you could. With that, we're going to move on to Dr. Mel Grubtov. Hey, the mute worked that time. And I believe you're hunkering down in Oregon, but we're hoping you'll talk a little bit about China like you did for us when you were here at the Alaska World Affairs Council. So Mel, I'll give it over to you.
Thank you very much. And it's nice to see you in person because you had to go off to Europe with your son, as I recall, when I was scheduled to visit, I think it was November that I gave a talk on China. Anyway, I had a wonderful time and really fell in love with the state on the very first visit there. Probably the highlight was, besides the talk, was taking a flight over the glaciers. That was just a great experience. So thank you. Yes, I'm in a rural area of Oregon, and we have been only fairly lightly touched by the virus. Knock on wood. I hope I haven't jinxed us, but so far we've been doing pretty well. And I'm in a very very tiny area, which means that social distance is more like 600 feet than 6 feet. But to get to China, that has become, the coronavirus has really almost, I hate to put it this way, but poisoned the well in terms of US-China relations. It's really become just another and particularly explosive new issue added to the many other issues that already have divided the US and China. And it's interesting too, because both leaders, Xi Jinping on one side and Donald Trump on the other, have followed much the same script in trying to deal with this. Initially a cover-up, and then some effort to exert leadership, take control of the issue, and now to proclaim that it's equivalent to going to war, with both of these guys trying to make the case for being excellent, decisive commanders-in-chief. Xi Jinping has, to some extent, succeeded better than Trump because he has, of course, he's in charge of a much different kind of society where it's possible to lock down large areas and to direct industry in particular ways. And in fact, as I'm sure we're all aware, he has succeeded in converting China's production of PPE into a new source of foreign aid, with not entirely complete success, because some of the aid, as for example masks, have turned out to be faulty and have had to be returned. But by and large, China has become a major exporter of these products, and for example, in Latin America, has really done what the United States normally would do in a global humanitarian crisis, which is to be a leader in providing assistance. And instead, the United States is more a recipient of foreign aid, including Chinese assistance, in this pandemic. So there's been a really major shift that has taken place. But beneath the surface, not all is well in China, even as the leadership there tries to change the narrative. Because the initial effort at cover-up, although we'll never know to what extent this is true, certainly has created an underground or an undertone of doubt about China's leadership. You know, the cover-up resulted in blaming the very people who were most important to dealing with the virus, including some important epidemiologists who eventually died of the COVID-19. And a lot of people were galvanized by that to criticism of the regime. And although that has been papered over now, and the Chinese government has led the way in trying to suggest that it's the United States or it's Italy or it's others that are responsible for the virus, I have to believe that at least in certain important circles among intellectuals, including doctors and others in the healthcare field, there's a lot of anger toward the regime for taking so long to come to grips with what has become a global crisis. But the impact on U.S.-China relations is very severe. And I've written a number of articles in the last month that have tried to suggest just how severe they really are, because you know, we had such a large list of issues in U.S.-China relations prior to all this, whether in the South China Sea or over Taiwan or the trade war, of course, just to mention a few. And now COVID-19 has become yet another in the list. And for me personally, it's an opportunity lost. This could be an opportunity for the US and China to come on board together to find common ground on an issue of global concern where the two richest societies are in place to do so, literally a world of good. And instead it's become a source of competition. You know, there are many very excellent ideas out there about just how that cooperation could take place. And it doesn't take an Einstein to figure out how it could happen. But the fact is that it's not. And what's very important, and a lot of people have forgotten this, is that in a previous time, going back to the George W. Bush period and extending through the Obama years, there was very significant and influential cooperation on public health issues between the United States and China. Starting with SARS and extending through H1N1 and the cooperation on the Ebola virus as it affected Africa. There were exchanges of doctors, of information, you name it. And both sides, you know, were on common ground in acknowledging just how useful that all was. And so that contrasts very dramatically to what we're seeing today. And it's really a very sad state of affairs. As far as enjoyment and looking forward, being here, I keep getting these pop-ups on questions. Being here in Oregon, I very much enjoy working with my wife on our heirloom apple orchard and veggie patch. Today we're shut in because it's, I could point the camera in the other direction, but it's raining outside. Not that unusual. We have periods of rain and then sunshine, and it's up and down. But I enjoy working out there with her, although I'm just a grunt. She's the real expert. In fact, she just rolled her eyes because she appeared at the doorway here. But she's the expert on that. And as far as looking forward, well, two of my daughters and families are in Portland, and I have really had no chance to see them and the grandchildren. My third daughter is in New York, and unfortunately, we can't get together there either, except by Zoom or other social media. But anyway, I'm looking forward to the time when we can have family get-togethers, when I can get together with friends, as everybody else has said, have a glass of wine and all that. And less significant, get a haircut, because this coronavirus has forced me to cut my own hair, which fortunately you probably can't tell. Thankfully, you can't see, you can't get a 360-degree view, but it's terrible. Anyway, that's the story. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gurtov. Keep the conversation going. I see many more questions popping up in the chat box, and thank you everyone for participating in our polls. We have more to come. And last but not least, for our featured speaker, we have Mr. Jim DeHart, who we had here in Alaska after his time working on drug trafficking in Afghanistan. And it was right before he went to Norway. Not that we, oh, you're on, oh, go ahead, Jim, you can unmute yourself. I see the ambassador's giving you a high five because he's super excited about your time in Norway. We all are. We want to hear, though, what's going on for you and the State Department and whatever in your sphere. Jim.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa, and really appreciate your organizing this and the chance to take part. I had a really wonderful visit to Alaska years ago to speak at the World Affairs Council there, so I hope to have a chance sometime to come back if that's possible. You'll find me, yes, exactly, eager to do so. But nice to see all of you. I am with the State Department here in Washington, D.C. I live in Falls Church City, which is just about 7 miles from D.C. and about a 15-minute drive from Coros at the moment, because there's absolutely zero traffic around here right now. I live in a community that's pretty, I would say, very rules-oriented and everybody doing the right thing. And to the extent that people are out and visiting any establishments, they're taking a very, very wide berth, I think, and being very courteous towards one another. The work of the State Department, it goes on, and we're still conducting diplomacy, but in a different way. About almost 90% now of the State Department is teleworking at any given time. I'm going into the office periodically, but we have established a rule in my office that we won't be nobody will be in the suite together. So if one of us needs to go in, then nobody else can go in, so that we maintain that distancing. The State Department's involved in a big effort, has been now for some time, in helping American citizens get back, repatriated to the U.S. As needed from overseas. And so I think that's probably been the most significant effort of the last several weeks. And I've had some friends and colleagues that have been involved in traveling overseas to help shepherd those efforts. And then we've got our own colleagues in embassies all over the world, some of whom are in, I feel for being in quite difficult circumstances if they're in a place with inadequate health infrastructure, and difficulty in traveling if they needed to do that to get out of an unhealthy situation. So those of us who are back here in the Washington area definitely have it easier than a lot of our colleagues overseas, depending where they are. My current job is negotiating security agreements, which basically means traveling constantly from country to country, which isn't happening at the moment. So we've gone to sort of a new era of negotiating by video teleconference, which, as it turns out, is quite effective, depending on how sensitive or non-sensitive the negotiation is. And so I've got 3 days of negotiations this week that we're conducting by teleconference and with people calling in from remote locations on both sides. And it's actually working. So, I would agree with those who've said that we'll never, I think, completely get back to our previous practices, but we'll probably think about new ways of doing certain things in the future. And that's probably a good thing, although I hope we won't change too much. On the question of what brings joy, and I feel guilty and feeling good about certain things at a time when so many people are having health impacts and economic devastation, really. But there's certain things I can't help but feel some satisfaction. I mean, time sort of has no meaning at the moment, and I feel like I have more time than I have had for a very, very long time. My yard looks great. If you walk around our neighborhood, everybody's yard looks terrific. It's really amazing, because that's one thing people can do. The garden stores remain open, for whatever reason they've been identified to be essential. I have taken real joy in to a certain extent in watching nature's revenge. And as we walk around the neighborhood now, I've seen more foxes and raccoons and rabbits and other wildlife than I ever remember seeing previously. And I think we're seeing this all over the world, wildlife kind of going back into terrain that they previously occupied. And I can only imagine, in Oslo, they probably got moose riding the metros now, but it's nice to see, and I enjoy that. I think pets are just loving that their owners are home with them all day. And so I have to think that the big winners here are animals, whether they're wild animals or domesticated animals, although maybe not bats or pangolins, because they've gotten kind of a bad name from this whole episode. But as Grant put it, previously, there are some Zen-like qualities of this whole crisis that we're facing together. And then just in terms of things I miss and I'd like to be able to do, it's sad to see all the live music go away for such a long period of time. So soon after I found a place close by where I could go see live music I enjoy. So hopefully it will not take too long to get back to that. But there's so much online now too, which is amazing to watch.
Okay, I'm going to unmute myself. Well, thank you very, very much. We have gone a little bit over. We're going to continue the conversation. It looks like about half of the folks have left us, but there's still about 40 some people part of this conversation. So anyone who wants to stay a little bit longer, I just unmuted everyone. So if you have kiddos or anything you want to mute yourself, you can go ahead and do that individually. But everyone right now is unmuted. And if you want to ask a question, go ahead. Let's see how this works. You can ask a question of any of our speakers or each other, and we'd love to hear from you.
Hey, Lisa, this is Laura. I'll jump in as a first. I don't know if she's still on here, but I saw Joyce Azam, who came and spoke to us too. So it'd be cool to hear her perspective if she's still here.
And Joyce is going to be one of our featured speaker for part 2 on May 7th. Joyce, are you still there?
Yes. Hello. How are you?
Turn on your video so we can see you.
Okay. Just one sec. I wasn't ready to be on video, to be honest. I'm so comfy. I'm so comfy in the mountains.
Are you in Jordan right now? Where are you?
No, I'm in Lebanon, and I'm in the mountains.
Oh my goodness.
Where else I can be, Lisa? I am, I climb mountains, so this is where I stay while in Lebanon. I stay in the mountains, and actually we still have snow, and I've been skiing for the past 2 weeks, like ski touring, because everything is closed, locked down here, and we cannot access any ski lifts or anything. But I have my skins, so I just go on my skis and alone, but yeah, this is how I'm spending my self-isolation.
So Joyce, there's a question earlier on, and I may be killing it, your talking points for next time around, but one of our participants asked about how the Lebanese government is reacting to the coronavirus, and how the coronavirus has impacted, for lack of a better term, the government's collapse, and all the difficulties you all are having over there. I don't know if you could highlight that.
So since 17th of October, we are having a revolution in Lebanon, and everything is not quite the same since that date, the 17th of October. And other than the economic crisis, we are really surviving here. The corona hit us. But honestly, in 2 words, I'm so proud of the Lebanese people, because we have around less than 700 cases, which is, for me, is really exceptional. And people are really being very responsible. And so the village where I live, 10 minutes, I went for a grocery shopping this afternoon, and everything is locked down. You just can enter a supermarket or a small grocery shop with your mask. You have to sanitize. So they are really taking care. I sometimes think the numbers are really, less than 700 cases in Lebanon. This is, with all the refugees we have also. But I don't know, we are handling it well. We are doing the tests. So yeah, the government is helping out, although we have a lot of obstacles, especially since the revolution and the new government that has been, elected. So yeah, this is, not bad situation as in Europe, let's say in Italy or Spain, as I have a lot of friends there and I lived there for years. So yeah, thank God the situation is not that bad in Lebanon.
Awesome, thank you.
I have a question for you, Joyce.
Yeah.
There was a report, I think, on NPR that Lebanese are now dressing like Americans. So you see them in tracksuits and so on, which is unheard of in Lebanon. Is that true?
What do you mean by tracksuits? I don't understand.
Well, just workout clothes and so on. The Lebanese are known for, always well dressed.
Yeah, look at me. I'm in a shirt.
There you go. Okay, I just wanted to get confirmation on the ground that it was happening.
Look, that's so true. I think the new generation wants the change. This is why all the young people are in the streets, and even today they are taking, they're being responsible, but they are continuing the revolution. We restarted yesterday, actually. So in Beirut, we have even we have the coronavirus, the COVID-19, but they are staying in their cars, but protesting against the government, because the parliament just had a gathering yesterday to decide things, and we don't want them to take advantage of this period, the COVID-19, and as we are all in our homes, so they can do whatever they want. So yeah, the new generation want to change, and they are different, and we are more, we are not really taking care of whatever the war generation, this is how we call it, the war generation did or want us to do. So yeah, I have hopes in that, and this is a good sign when you just go in your tracking suit and move around. This is a good sign.
I agree.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Jump right in. Grant, it's for some reason bouncing to you. I guess you're next. Do you have a question?
No, I don't have a question. It's must have come by accident. Yeah, this whole thing has, I think everybody responds to the pandemic, this virus, differently, and based on where we sit in our perspectives. And I certainly have one, from where I look at things, and I do tend to spend a lot of time looking at the Asian regional defense, and particularly the military, the security angle out here. And this is a very interesting time to see what's going on, particularly in the military perspective, because it has really hit the U.S. military hard. I think with the expense of all of this, there's not going to be, defense budgets are going to shrink, and that's the reality. Whereas the Chinese are, very interestingly, are going full speed ahead with their military buildup. And it's a system where you can do that, and one has to be in some awe of what they're doing. But one can see where this is ending. So this is going to be very interesting. And I write a lot on this topic, so I expect I'll have lots to write about for a long time. But once again, I would really appreciate the chance to be part of this, and to hear the day-to-day accounts is really the interesting part for me of how life is for people around the world. And I've been impressed actually with how sort of bright, sort of upbeat the accounts are. Not upbeat, but it's not hair on fire sort of stuff. I have noticed, of course, that one's outlook on this does tend to depend a lot on whether or not one has a steady income coming in. And I would notice in all the press coverage of this, and I do follow it like a lot of people, I haven't noticed almost any coverage of the 20 million people who've lost their jobs. And that looks to me like a really glaring omission. And I wish that the press would focus on this, what the reality is for these people. And partly I'm from a place called Fayette County, Pennsylvania. My family is, and I saw the coal and steel mines close, and so watched the effects of all of that on my cousins, etc., firsthand. So this is something I do hope we see more of, that coverage, and that I think that'd be a useful thing. But this has really been just a really nice opportunity, and I'm glad to get up at 2 in the morning and stick around till the end. So thank you very much. It was well worth it. Thanks.
Thank you.
If I may, it's been wonderful hearing from the globe, but we really haven't heard a lot from within the U.S. For one, I'm curious as to how things are in Alaska. Just as I'm just watching the chat and the conversations about the different states, and I hinted on, how behind Texas has been and continues to be. I'm curious to see how things are in Alaska, for instance. What has the response been?
Do any of my fellow Alaskans want to comment on that?
I mean, I can take that, Lisa. I can at least share my perspective. So Laura Servant, and I'm a board member for the Alaska World Affairs Council, which is one of my great honors. And I mean, up here in Alaska, it's been kind of an interesting perspective because we're already semi-isolated as is. We're not an island, but we kind of have that island feel because we're so disconnected from everywhere. And I know I was really proud at how quickly our governor and our mayor stepped up to bring down the hunker down. Before we even really we had like maybe 1 or 2 cases before they actually came out with the hunker down perspectives. And now we're looking at possible ways to phase it out. But I think that definitely had a good stem of the cases. But like everyone's saying in the chats, with testing not as prevalent as it could be, I'm a little concerned about going too quickly. But at least here locally, I think everyone's been respecting it for the most part and understanding that we need to be a little bit more distant from people. And I appreciate I think they jumped off, but I know the Chamber of Commerce was on here, the Anchorage Chamber of Commerce, and they've done really well at like providing different opportunities for their members to, you know, if we have restaurants that are still open for to go, they've been posting about it so that us residents know where we can go to support local local organizations. And I know they were the ones spearheading the conversation on the gig economy and those part-time workers, all those people that have lost their jobs. How do we support them in this industry? And then as we go forward, how do we continue to provide support to them? How do we be a value added instead of just being like, here's a fun, you know, webinar for now? Like, how do we continue to instill this sense of community?
Thank you.
That's just my sense. I'll let someone else jump on because it's different across the city and the state.
I mean, I understand travel within Alaska has been stopped. Am I right?
For the most part, I know there's some that are, you know, essential travel that's still happening,
Right.
but it's very limited right now. And we're like they're not letting anyone into the state either. So I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Lisa, but I believe that.
The flights are still coming in, but there's a 2-week quarantine for any people coming in, a mandatory 2-week quarantine. So flights are still coming on a limited basis, but it is shorter. For the limited transportation around Alaska, I think it's something that we see in other places as well. It's kind of a rural urban issue, right? So if, as we heard from Russia, where Sonia is in a smaller part of Russia, those smaller communities of Alaska are really concerned that if people from the big city or fishing industry or others come into their smaller communities and become sick, that their health care system won't be able to support that influx. You know, we talk about the limited amount of PPE in cities like even Anchorage. Imagine a very small town of Alaska and what they have. It's very little. So is that, I think that's the reason for our in-state travel mobility ban. It's not really a ban, it's a suggestion, but that's because of the rural communities.
Lisa, which I think is actually important because we definitely haven't had that in Texas. In fact, as a way to kind of change the daily routine, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, I went for a drive outside of Houston for about, you know, an hour and a half away. And there were some, you know, small towns where stores were open. So, and of course we had a lot of people that would have come back from Louisiana after the Mardi Gras and so on. So, you know, when you look at that and look at a city like Houston and how international it is, and you look at the numbers of testing, it doesn't add up, which really basically, I think, leaves us with very little confidence in the numbers, as well as the preparedness, which I think I wrote it in our chat. You know, in the news, we've kept hearing about the apex, you know, which was like a week ago and so on. And not necessarily focusing on the fact that apex was really New York, that for the rest of the country, the apex is moving along. And for a state like Texas, for instance, it's forecasted for mid-May. Like I said earlier, you know, our testing is in Harris County, which is the largest county, is at 0.025%. I mean, that's just, you know, ridiculous. So I'm impressed with the Alaskan response, and to see that there has been these measures put into place, which make perfect sense. You see, I knew I should have been in Alaska when this thing hit.
Alaska has many, many small towns that are not connected to anywhere except by airplane.
Right.
I was out there in early March when this was ramping up, and people were very aware of the legacy from 1918 when the flu swept and wiped out entire villages, and villages were left with, you know, 6 or 8 people. And so the villages, many of them have shut down and not allowed people in or out. We did have an airline that's gone out of business as this has been going on. And so there's villages who are having trouble getting, just groceries, that kind of thing, into their stores. And so it is a different problem out there.
Sure, that makes sense.
There's
Places like Halibut Cove, for instance, how are they getting their supplies and so on?
There's a huge concern about the upcoming fishing season and the number of people who are going to be coming in. So Cordova is going to get hit first with the first opening of the fishing season there. There's a big concern about what's going to happen when that influx of people come into Cordova or Bristol Bay or wherever. So that's one thing. The other thing is our economy has just been pummeled between the oil prices. There's going to be no tourism this summer. The permanent fund has gone down because of the stock market. I don't know how we're going to get out of this.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Somebody mentioned the unemployment, and we're going to feel the ripples around the world from that, in that, people who aren't paying their rent now, and then landlords who aren't paying their bills, and not, everything's going to come due at some point, and it's going to be an economic pressure around the world on every business.
Absolutely. I mean, even for banks that are furloughing mortgage payments, well, let's say they'll furlough for 3 months. Well, come the 4th month, people are still going to be required to make those payments, and jobs have been lost. And, so I mean, this is needless to say in Houston and Texas as well, with the oil industry being our primary source of income, things, that there's been huge numbers of jobs lost. But I see your point vis-a-vis Alaska. I mean, definitely the tourism industry being such a huge part of Alaskan income and so on. I can see that as being a problem for sure. Perhaps, I'll fly to Alaska and I'll quarantine in Lisa's house for 2 weeks, and that all will be good.
I am okay with that. Okay, so with that, I'm going to show polling results. Bear with me. This is the first time we've done a poll. So can anyone see this coming up?
Yes.
Does it show all of them, or does it show just one of them?
Just one right now.
Okay. Let's see here.
Also, I think it was Farah. I saw was it you that had your puppo that you lifted up? I'm sorry, your coworker.
Sorry.
Was that you? No, it was Karen. Karen lifted her coworker up on her lap. I was going to say cute dog.
Okay, and we will post those results as well as the recording of this video. So if any of you joined late and want to see it from this beginning in the entirety, we're going to have this up on the World Affairs Council website. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll be back. Like I said, this was so popular. We're going to have part 2 with Dr. Joyce Azam, who is here today. Joyce, thank you for joining us, and we can't wait to hear more from you. And we will have Catherine Barnes from London, and we're going to have a friend from India and more. So please join us for that program and more. So keep in touch with us and keep looking out for us on Facebook and our website, because we're doing more and we miss all of you. And we look forward to more programmings with the Alaska World Affairs Council. Bye, everybody.
Well, thank you, Lisa.
Stay safe. Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Stay safe.
Thanks, you too. Bye, Jeremy.